Symphony Hall. There's a tribute concert to Keith Emerson from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, who sadly died last year. And all the proceeds are going to Care After Combat, a charity founded by Jim Davidson and Simon Weston, the Falklands veteran, which supports military families. So a bit of fanfare for the common man before we talk to Jim Davidson. Keith Emerson was a keyboard wizard. There will be another keyboard wizard there, Rick Wakeman. Jim Davidson, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Not only Rick Wakeman, but a 60-piece symphony orchestra as well.
Yeah, it's a bit indulgent of me. Keith and I were great mates. I mean, he was my standby best man for future weddings and things like that. Sadly, took his own life a while ago for reasons, well, you know, things. We'll move on from that. But years ago, you know, in 1977, they were appearing, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, in Montreal with a 60-piece orchestra. And I thought, I've got to go and see this. So my manager said, I can't go. And I said, there's nothing you could say to stop me going. He said, you've been offered a TV series for Thames Television. So I never went. So I never saw them with a 60-piece orchestra. And I thought, wouldn't it be good now to get Keith's music with that orchestra? So that's what I've done. I've put this show together. It's at the Symphony Hall. Rick Wakeman's going to play. There's a young lady who's blind, actually. She plays a lot of Keith stuff. She's a brilliant pianist. She's going to do Keith Emerson Piano Concerto. Her name's Rachel Flowers. Lee Jackson from The Nice is coming. Yeah. And my favourites are a French outfit, a man called Thierry Elise, who plays grand piano and does some Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff. Jazzed up, as my mum would say. And it's going to be great. We've got a tribute band called Noddy's Puncture that do some stuff. And fanfare for the common man there that you just played is being done with the orchestra and Keith Emerson's band from Los Angeles. And who's playing the keyboards on it is Keith's son, Aaron Emerson.
Fantastic.
Isn't that great? And then to top that, Keith's grandson, Ethan Emerson, is playing grand piano, another track that Keith wrote. It's going to be a really, really moving night.
And there's going to be a piece played that for a world premiere for the first time. One of Keith's compositions.
Yeah, he was working on a piece called Beyond the Stars. I mean, wow. And he never quite finished it. So a nice Norwegian chap who worked alongside the conductor, Tellier. So they finished it off and they're going to play that. It's great. I mean, and in that symphony hall, I mean, it is just fantastic.
How did you get to know Keith Emerson?
Well, when I used to work for Radio Rentals when I was a kid, I used to go through the bins outside their recording studio and look for anything, you know, any sort of memorabilia. I went to see him a couple of times live, and it just blew me away. And then when I got famous, I was down Tramp nightclub one night at the bar having a light ale, and this man tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hi, I believe you're a fan of my band, and I'm a big fan of yours." And that was Keith Emerson.
Wow.
And it was like, to me, meeting the Almighty. I didn't quite know what to say, and he sat me down, and it was great. And over the years, he turned me from being a fan into a close friend. And I was still a fan, though, you know. Whenever we got together, I always wanted him to sit at the piano. I'd meet him in a pub where they had a piano and hope for the best. He really was a great guy and a great band, and I miss him terribly. And I don't know how I'm going to get through this night because it's something I've always wanted to do. I'm not on stage, I'm not doing anything. I've got a little tribute to read out to Keith, which is funny and in bad taste, which he would love. But all that music with an orchestra, I think it's going to be a very emotional evening. There's people coming from all over the world.
And the proceeds, I mentioned going to Care After Combat, which you've set up as a charity with Simon Weston, because you've done a lot of stuff entertaining the troops in various places, whether it's the Falklands or Iraq or whatever. But and the charity's been going how long?
2 years now. This is a bit different, but 2 and a bit years. It's set up to deal with the veterans that are in prison. And it's not a very sexy charity, as you can imagine. But we have 3,500 veterans in prison for whatever reason. And what we do, we give these guys a mentor and try and plan a way for their life to be improved when they come out. I mean, if they do the crime, they do the time. You know, that goes without saying. But what we want to do is to reduce reoffending, and the government and I and Simon got together and we put together this plan, and the government are really on side. We've just seen all this stuff about prisons and how bad this and that is. Well, prisons are not very nice places, but the prisons that we've been in, I've noticed all the hard-working staff are concentrating on rehabilitation. They're not warehouses full of people. These are people that need to, you know, get a grip of their life and come out. And we give our veterans a second chance. I think most people deserve that. The reason we just do it with veterans is because I know veterans. I don't know anybody else.
Well, you're hoping to raise upwards of 20 grand, and you're touring as well. But as a youngster, you played, talking about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Carl Palmer, the drummer, of course, was from Birmingham, born in Handsworth. But you played the drums, didn't you, a bit?
I did play the drums. Now, listen, this is a great story about Carl Palmer. He is, without a doubt, one of the nicest men you could ever meet. He's a great guy, because I remember going to Czechoslovakia, and Keith said, "How did the Moog sound? Was it in tune?" I said, "Yeah." Greg said, "How was my voice?" "Fine." And Carl said, "Was there a queue at the merchandise stand?" He's still got his paper round money. Keith had died, and sadly a while later, Greg Lake had died. And at Greg's funeral, Carl walked in. I said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Because you look really well." He said, "I'm fine." I said, "Well, I'm going to have to cancel my bet." I said, "Because I had you down as a treble." He said, "If you've got good odds, put a couple of quid on for me." Great. There were some great bands from Birmingham. Have you just seen ELO out on tour again?
I saw them in Hull a couple of weeks ago.
They are just sensational, aren't they?
The music replication, it's like listening to an album, isn't it?
It was great. It was great. The thing about Emerson, Lake and Palmer when I saw them was just the noise that three people could make and the amount of energy that they threw into it. That was something I learned, you know, give it your all. Take your audience somewhere and then give them the best night out they've ever had. That's what you've got to do.
So you're a big music fan then, as a youngster?
Well, I was a music fan as a youngster. I was a Saturday boy in a hairdresser's, and they, instead of listening to reggae like all my mates did, because we were sort of semi-skinheads, you know, back in the 60s, we were listening to the Nice, and suddenly I didn't like guitars anymore, and I liked Hammond organ, and when a Moog synthesizer came out and Emerson, Lake and Palmer came together, that was me hooked. And then, of course, Rick Wakeman and Yes, and me and Rick Wakeman go back quite a bit. We were speaking the other day, you know, when he used to drink, and I used to drink quite a bit too, we bought a football club, and I can't remember any of it.
What was the football club you bought?
Camberley, I think.
Right, okay.
Camberley Football Club. I remember sitting with Rick one night in an Indian restaurant. The man said, "It's time to leave," and Rick said, "We're not going yet." And so this bloke said, "Please leave." And Rick said, "Right, how much do you want?" He said, "For the bill." No, he said, "For the restaurant." I've got a checkbook out. Those were the days, eh?
But 40 years on is your tour, and you're going to be back in our patch November the 1st at the Gatehouse Theatre in Stafford, and then the 14th of November, Palace Theatre in Redditch. And that's an autobiographical show in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, sort of. I talk about all the bits and pieces. I think to myself now, I'm not just going to go on stage and make people laugh for the sake of it. I'll try and tell them a story about me that they can understand. It's like almost like a talking book. And of course I forget the words, so I make up new ones. Redditch is a really, really nice theatre because it's round the next door to it is an Indian restaurant. And all night when I was backstage, you could just smell tandoori chicken. And when I came up, I used to run to that restaurant and eat like a pig.
In the early days, because you won New Faces, and that was a sort of, that was the big break, which was actually one of the other shows you did.
It was. That was also it switched me on to Birmingham, because that was done in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I did Tiswas, which was in Birmingham all the time. And my first panto was in Birmingham. I love the place. I just think it's great.
But you did audition for Opportunity Knocks, and Hughie Green told you to go away or something like that.
He said to me, "How long you been doing it, old son?" I thought, oh, here we go. And I said, 3 years, Mr. Green. I've been doing it about 3 months. And he said, "Well, you just go away and practice." And I tell the audience what I actually said to him. I can't say it on here unless you want to be closed down, mate.
No, I need to keep paying the mortgage.
What? You've got to keep paying the mortgage, and and you work for the BBC? Come on, you got to get on the list.
I'm nowhere near that list.
I was. I'd have been well up that list from 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, because you did the Generation Game, for example, for what, 8 years, something like that, 7 years, 8 years.
Should have been 8 years. I think they sacked me after 7. They suddenly realised, what's he doing here? He mustn't be here. He's horrible.
You'd have been top of that list at one time, wouldn't you?
Do you know what? It wouldn't be far off. I just think it's slightly vulgar having people divulge their wages and that. Even though BBC is public money, do we really want to air our washing and the way we do things? I think we get great entertainment from all those people, and I think they're worth every penny. And don't forget, if that Chris Evans is getting $2.5 million a year, right, half of that is going into the public funds in tax.
Jim Davidson with us. Friday, Jim's going to be in Birmingham at Symphony Hall for this special Keith Emerson Tribute Concert, with the money being raised for Care After Combat, the charity. Jim, a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's great. Thanks, mate.